The moon hung high in the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the dense forest that bordered the old Lover's Lane. This secluded spot, nestled at the edge of town, was known for its breathtaking views and romantic ambience. For years, couples had driven up here to escape the prying eyes of their small town, seeking solace in each other's company. Tonight, it was my turn to experience the allure of Lover's Lane. My girlfriend, Lily, and I had been dating for 6 months, and we decided it was time to visit the infamous spot. We parked my old, beat-up car at the edge of the overlook, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. The view was indeed stunning, with the town lights twinkling below like a sea of stars. As we sat there, talking and laughing, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The dense trees and thick underbrush seemed to close in around us, their shadows dancing menacingly in the moonlight. Lily must have sensed my unease because she suddenly asked, "Have you ever heard the story of the Hookman?" I chuckled, trying to mask my growing apprehension. "Yeah, everyone knows that story. It's just an old urban legend meant to scare people." She leaned in closer, her eyes glinting mischievously. "Do you remember how it goes?" I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Sure, it goes something like this. A couple, much like us, comes up to a place like this. They hear a news report about an escaped convict with a hook for a hand. The guy wants to leave, but the girl convinces him to stay. Eventually, they hear strange noises outside the car. When they finally decide to leave, they find a bloody hook hanging from the car door handle." Lily smiled, a mix of excitement and fear on her face. "Do you think it's true?" I shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's just a story. There's no way it could actually happen." But even as I said the words, I couldn't help but glance nervously out the window. The forest seemed darker than before, the shadows deeper and more threatening. I shook my head, trying to dispel my unease. "Let's get out of here," I suggested, starting the engine. Just as the car roared to life, a loud thud echoed from the roof, sending a jolt of fear through both of us. Lily screamed, and I hit the gas, peeling out of Lover's Lane as fast as my old car could manage. As we sped down the winding road, I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. The forest receded behind us, but the sense of being watched lingered, a dark presence that clung to us like a shadow. Lily's hand found mine, her grip tight with fear. "Do you think it was him?" she whispered. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. I didn't want to admit that the legend of the Hookman might be more than just a story, that we might have just narrowly escaped an encounter with something truly terrifying. And as we drove away from Lover's Lane, I couldn't shake the feeling that our night was far from over, that the Hookman wasn't done with us yet. The drive back to town felt like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest, and I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a dark figure chasing after us. Lily remained silent, her eyes wide with fear, clutching my hand as if it were her lifeline. When we finally reached the outskirts of town, I pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of a 24-hour diner. The familiar neon sign flickered above us, a welcome sight after the darkness of Lover's Lane. I parked the car and turned off the engine, letting out a shaky breath. Lily and I sat in silence for a moment, the tension between us palpable. Finally, she spoke. "Do you think we're safe now?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. "Yeah, I think so. Let's go inside and grab a coffee. We need to calm down." The diner was nearly empty, save for a couple of truckers nursing their late-night meals. We found a booth in the back and slid in, the worn vinyl seats squeaking beneath us. A tired-looking waitress approached, and we ordered 2 coffees, hoping the warmth would help steady our nerves. As we waited for our drinks, I couldn't help but notice the flicker of fear in Lily's eyes. "Do you really think it was him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know, Lily. Maybe it was just a branch or an animal. We're probably overreacting." But even as I said it, I knew I didn't believe it. The thud on the roof of the car had felt too deliberate, too sinister. I tried to push the thought out of my mind as the waitress returned with our coffees. We sipped our drinks in silence, the warmth slowly seeping into our bodies. I glanced around the diner, taking in the mundane normalcy of it all. It felt surreal after the terror of the past hour. Just as I began to relax, the sound of a news report on the diner's old TV caught my attention. The grainy image showed a stern-faced anchorwoman delivering a breaking news story. Escaped convict is considered extremely dangerous. Authorities warn that the man, identified as Richard Hook Harris, is armed and should not be approached. Residents are advised to stay indoors and report any suspicious activity to the police immediately. My blood ran cold. Hook. Harris. The Hookman. Lily's eyes met mine, wide with fear. We need to go to the police, she whispered. I nodded, my mind racing. Let's finish our coffee and then we'll go. We need to tell them what happened. But as we hurriedly drank the last of our coffees, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that the Hookman was closer than we thought. After gulping down the last of our coffee, we quickly paid the bill and headed back to the car. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, finally managing to unlock the doors. The parking lot, once a beacon of safety, now felt exposed and vulnerable. We climbed into the car, and I started the engine, the familiar rumble somewhat comforting. As we pulled out of the diner parking lot, I noticed a police cruiser parked across the street. An officer sat inside, sipping coffee and staring intently at something in the distance. I decided to stop and report what had happened. I parked next to the cruiser, and we approached the officer. He rolled down his window and raised an eyebrow. Can I help you? Officer, I began, trying to keep my voice steady, we just came from Lover's Lane, and we think we had an encounter with the Hookman. The officer's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Richard Hook Harris? Did you see him? I shook my head. No, but we heard something on the roof of our car, and we were really scared. Then we saw the news report in the diner. He nodded, looking serious. You did the right thing by coming here. Get back in your car and follow me to the station. We need to get your statements and check your vehicle for any signs of him. We quickly got back into the car and followed the cruiser to the police station. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual nighttime sounds muffled by the oppressive weight of our fear. At the station, we were greeted by another officer who led us into a small, brightly lit room. The walls were lined with wanted posters and police procedural charts. We sat down, and the officer who had escorted us in began to ask questions. Tell me exactly what happened, he said, pulling out a notepad. I recounted everything, from the drive to Lover's Lane to the loud thud on the roof and our panicked escape. Lily added details I had missed, her voice trembling. The officer nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes. We'll send a unit to check out Lover's Lane. In the meantime, let's take a look at your car. We followed him back outside, where another officer was already inspecting our vehicle. He shone a flashlight over the roof and along the sides, his face grim. Found something, he said, motioning us over. We approached and saw deep scratches on the roof of the car. They were jagged and irregular, as if made by something sharp and uneven. My heart sank. These look like they could have been made by a hook, the officer muttered. He turned to us, his expression serious. You two are lucky. It looks like you had a close call. Lily clung to my arm, her eyes wide with fear. What do we do now? The officer sighed. We'll keep you updated on the search for Harris. For now, go home, lock your doors, and stay inside. If you see or hear anything suspicious, call us immediately. We nodded and headed back to the car, the reality of our situation sinking in. As we drove home, the adrenaline began to wear off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. When we finally pulled into Lily's driveway, I walked her to the door and made sure she was safely inside before heading to my own house. The sense of unease lingered, and I knew sleep would be hard to come by. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind raced with thoughts of the Hookman. Was he still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next victim? Or had we narrowly escaped a legend that was all too real? One thing was certain, this night was far from over, and the Hookman was still out there, somewhere in the darkness. The next morning, I awoke groggy and unrested. My mind had been a whirlwind of nightmares, all featuring the dark silhouette of a man with a hook for a hand. I rubbed my eyes and glanced at my phone, seeing a missed call and a message from Lily. Hey, are you okay? I barely slept last night. Let's meet for breakfast and talk about what we should do next. I quickly texted back and agreed to meet at our favorite cafe. The small, cozy place had always been a sanctuary for us, and I hoped it would provide some comfort after the previous night's events. As I drove to the cafe, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every pedestrian, every passing car seemed suspicious. Paranoia gnawed at me, making my palms sweat on the steering wheel. When I finally arrived, I spotted Lily already seated at a corner table, her eyes scanning the room nervously. I joined her, and we ordered breakfast, though neither of us had much of an appetite. As we sipped our coffee, Lily spoke first. What do you think we should do? Should we leave town for a few days? I considered it. The thought of staying somewhere safe and far from the Hookman was appealing. Maybe. But we should probably check in with the police first, see if they have any updates. Just as we were about to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello? Is this your name?" a gruff voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Officer Daniels. We spoke last night at the station. We have some news." My heart raced. "What is it?" "We found some more evidence at Lover's Lane. Fresh tracks leading away from where you parked, and some more deep scratches on nearby trees. We believe Harris might still be in the area. We're advising everyone to stay indoors tonight." I thanked him and hung up, relaying the information to Lily. Her face paled, and she gripped my hand tightly. "We can't just sit at home, waiting for him to find us. We need to do something." As we left the cafe, I thought about our options. We could either leave town, or we could try to find somewhere safe to stay. But where would that be? The Hookman could be anywhere. That evening, we decided to stay at Lily's house. Her parents were out of town, and it seemed safer than my apartment. We locked all the doors and windows, drawing the curtains tightly. The sense of impending doom hung over us as we tried to distract ourselves with movies and games, but our minds were elsewhere. As night fell, the house grew eerily quiet. Every creak and groan of the old structure made us jump. We stayed close together, our nerves frayed and our fear palpable. Around midnight, a loud crash echoed from outside. We froze, our eyes wide with terror. Slowly, I crept to the window and peeked through a crack in the curtains. There, standing in the shadows at the edge of the yard, was a dark figure. The moonlight glinted off something metallic in his hand. My blood ran cold. It was him. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. "He's here," I whispered to Lily. Her eyes widened in fear. "What do we do?" I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. "We need help. The Hookman is outside our house," I told the operator. "We're dispatching officers to your location. Stay inside and stay hidden," the operator instructed. As we waited for the police to arrive, the minutes felt like hours. The figure outside moved closer, and I could hear the faint scrape of metal against wood as he approached the house. We huddled together, praying for the sound of sirens to break the silence. Finally, the wail of police sirens filled the air, and flashing lights illuminated the yard. The dark figure fled into the night, disappearing into the shadows just as the police arrived. The officers searched the area but found no sign of Harris. They assured us they would continue to patrol the neighborhood and advised us to stay vigilant. As the night wore on, the fear gradually gave way to exhaustion. We knew this ordeal was far from over, but for now, we had survived another encounter with the Hookman. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Lily and I stayed at her house, the police regularly checking in on us. Despite their increased patrols, the sense of impending danger never left us. Every time the wind rustled the trees or a branch snapped, we would jump, hearts pounding with fear. On the third night, a knock at the door startled us both. It was Officer Daniels, his face drawn with concern. "We have reason to believe Harris might be targeting you specifically," he said. "We found a note at one of the scenes. It mentioned a couple fitting your description." My stomach churned with dread. "What does it mean?" Daniels sighed. "It means we need to move you to a safer location. There's an old safe house on the outskirts of town. It's not widely known, and it should be secure enough until we catch him." We quickly packed a few essentials and followed Officer Daniels in an unmarked police car, navigating through back roads to avoid drawing attention. The safe house was a modest cabin, nestled deep in the woods. It was fortified with security cameras and heavy locks, a stark contrast to its rustic appearance. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but somewhat reassuring. Daniels showed us how to use the security system and assured us that officers would be patrolling the area regularly. "You're safe here," he said before leaving. "Just stay inside, and we'll handle the rest." As the door closed behind him, Lily and I exchanged a look of weary relief. The cabin was small but cozy, with a wood-burning stove and a comfortable bed. We settled in, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in the midst of our ordeal. That night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the Hookman was still out there, watching and waiting. The sounds of the forest seemed amplified in the darkness, every rustle and creak sending my heart racing. Around midnight, a strange noise broke the stillness. It was a soft tapping, barely audible over the sound of the wind. I sat up, straining to hear. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Lily stirred beside me, her eyes wide with fear. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, creeping out of bed and grabbing the small flashlight Daniels had left us. I moved towards the window, the tapping growing louder with each step. My hand shook as I pulled back the curtain, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There, standing just outside the window, was the dark figure of the Hookman. His eyes glinted with malice, and in the dim light, I could see the sharp, menacing hook in place of his hand. He raised it slowly, tapping it against the glass in a chilling rhythm. I stumbled back, my mind racing. "He's here," I whispered to Lily. "We need to call the police." But as I fumbled for my phone, the Hookman disappeared into the shadows. The tapping stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. I quickly dialed 911, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. "We're sending officers immediately," the operator assured me. "Stay inside and don't engage him." Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air, and the cabin was bathed in flashing lights. The police searched the area thoroughly but found no trace of the Hookman. Officer Daniels arrived, his expression grim. "We'll increase the patrols around the cabin," he said. "But it's clear that Harris is fixated on you. We'll need to catch him before he tries something again." As the officers left, the sense of unease deepened. We were safe for now, but the Hookman was still out there, lurking in the darkness. And I couldn't shake the feeling that our ordeal was far from over. The following day, we decided to set up our own precautions. We fortified the cabin further, adding extra locks to the doors and windows, and kept a closer eye on the security cameras. Every shadow, every rustle in the leaves sent our hearts racing, but we were determined to stay vigilant. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest, we received another call from Officer Daniels. "We're closing in on Harris," he said. "We've received several tips about his whereabouts. Hang tight and stay alert. We'll have him soon." The reassurance brought little comfort. As night fell, a thick fog rolled in, shrouding the cabin in an eerie mist. The air was heavy with tension, and the quiet was oppressive. We huddled together, watching the security feeds, our nerves frayed and our fear palpable. Around midnight, the cameras flickered and went dark. Our stomachs dropped in unison. I grabbed the flashlight, my hand trembling as I tried to stay calm. "Lily, stay close to me." We heard the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate. The door handle rattled, and we both backed away, clutching each other tightly. Suddenly, the door burst open, and there stood the Hookman, his eyes gleaming with malevolence. Before we could react, he lunged at us, his hook glinting in the dim light. We screamed and scrambled to the other side of the room, knocking over furniture in our desperate attempt to escape. I grabbed a heavy lamp and swung it at him, but he deflected it easily with his hook, the force sending me crashing to the floor. Lily screamed and grabbed a fire poker from the hearth, thrusting it at the Hookman with all her strength. It caught him off guard, and he stumbled back, giving us a brief moment to run. We dashed for the back door, but it was locked tight. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The Hookman recovered quickly, advancing on us with a terrifying determination. Just as he reached us, the room was flooded with light, and a loud voice shouted, "Freeze! Police!" Officers stormed in, their weapons trained on the Hookman. He hesitated, his eyes darting around for an escape, but there was none. He dropped his hook, raising his hands in surrender. The officers quickly subdued him, placing him in handcuffs and leading him out of the cabin. Officer Daniels approached us, his face a mix of relief and concern. "Are you both okay?" We nodded, still shaking from the encounter. We thought we were done for," I stammered. Daniels sighed. "You're safe now. Harris is going back to where he belongs. We'll make sure he never hurts anyone again." As the officers escorted Richard Hook Harris away, the tension in the cabin slowly dissipated. Lily and I clung to each other, grateful to be alive. The nightmare was finally over. In the following days, the story of our ordeal spread throughout the town. People spoke of the Hookman with a renewed sense of caution, and Lover's Lane became a place to be avoided rather than a romantic destination. We were hailed as survivors, but the experience left a lasting mark on us. We moved away from the town, seeking a fresh start far from the memories of that terrifying night. But even in our new home, the sound of a branch scraping against the window or the creak of the floorboards at night would send a shiver down our spines. The legend of the Hookman lived on, a cautionary tale told to frighten and warn. And though Richard Harris was locked away, the fear he instilled would never truly fade. For Lily and me, it was a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places, waiting to strike when we least expect it.